My nephew shattered my daughter's hand at a family pool party, so I broke his father's pride right there in front of everyone. My sister Marlene had been raising her son Brock without a single consequence since the day he could walk. Brock was 15 and built like a linebacker. With so many hockey trophies, Marlene bought a second display case for them. Everyone knew Brock was gifted. Everyone also knew Brock was cruel. At family gatherings, he backed the younger cousins into corners and squeezed their arms until they begged him to stop. Told the smaller kids they were soft and useless, while his parents beamed at their big, strong, athletic son. My daughter Ren was 11 and tiny for her age. She loved the piano and watercolors and had never raised a hand to anyone. Brock decided that made her the perfect prey. For almost 2 years, he tormented her. He knocked her paintings off the table when no adults were watching. He yanked her braid hard enough to snap her head back. He whispered to her about what he'd do if she ever ran her mouth. I tried to handle it like an adult. I told Marlene Brock was being too rough with Ren, and it had to stop. She rolled her eyes and said, "Kids will be kids." She said Ren needed to grow a thicker skin. She said maybe if Ren played a real sport instead of sitting at a piano all day, she wouldn't be such an easy mark. Her husband Trevor nodded along and said Brock didn't have a mean bone in his body, that I was blowing normal kid stuff out of proportion. So I stopped bringing it up and just did my best to keep Ren away from him. Then came the 4th of July pool party at my parents' house. Trevor spent the first hour bragging about Brock's latest hockey showcase, Scouts circling, a college ride practically in the bag. I tuned him out and kept my eye on Ren in the shallow end near the grown-ups. Then I went inside to refill the cooler. I was gone, maybe 4 minutes. When I came back out, I heard screaming from the deep end. I sprinted toward it and found Ren sitting at the edge of the water, cradling her hand against her chest, her face white, her mouth open in a scream that had no sound left in it. Brock was standing over her with the diving board ladder gripped in his fist, smirking like he'd just won something. Her fingers were already swelling and bending in directions fingers are not supposed to bend. 2 of them were clearly broken, and the back of her hand was turning deep purple. The younger kids were crying and pointing at Brock. One of them was shouting that he'd slammed the metal gate of the ladder down on Ren's hand on purpose. I dropped down next to my daughter and held her wrist while she sobbed. Trevor came strolling over asking what the fuss was about. Brock immediately started talking. He said Ren grabbed the ladder first, that she was in his way, that it was an accident, and she should have moved. I asked the crying kids what happened. One said Ren didn't do anything, that Brock wanted to jump off the board, and she was just resting her hand on the rail, and when she didn't move fast enough, he yanked the gate down as hard as he could, and laughed. Trevor shook his head. He said kids exaggerate. He said there had to be more to it, that Brock would never hurt a little girl on purpose. He said Ren probably did something to set him off. That word, probably. My daughter was sitting there with 2 broken fingers, and a hand swelling up like a balloon, and my brother-in-law said she probably set him off. Something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly. Trevor was still talking. He was saying I coddled Ren too much, that maybe this would teach her to pay attention. I hit him mid-sentence. My fist caught him square in the jaw, and his head whipped to the side. He staggered back and went down on the wet concrete next to where Ren was still crying. He stared up at me with pure shock and said I'd lost my mind, that he was calling the police. He tried to push himself up, and I put my foot on his chest and held him there. I told him to stay down. I told him his son had been tormenting my daughter for 2 years, and he did nothing. I told him I'd come to him like a grown man and ask him to deal with it, and he laughed in my face. I told him his son just shattered an 11-year-old's hand over a diving board, and his first instinct was to blame her. I told him he failed as a father, and I was finished watching it happen. The paramedics came fast, and while one of them knelt beside my daughter, asking if she could wiggle her fingers, I looked over and saw Marlene crouched next to Brock, asking if his hand was okay, as if he were the one who'd been hurt. That was the moment I understood this was never going to be fixed with apologies and family talks. These people were already choosing the attacker over the child who was bleeding. Click here to watch full video.